The government has a new idea, the illegal migration bill.
Today we are introducing new legislation to keep my promise to you, to stop the boats.
But hang on a minute, you might think that they'd already solved this problem, right? I mean, after all, they used to talk about this.
We need to look at the legal framework that we have, all the panoply of laws that an illegal immigrant has at his or her disposal that allow them to stay here, and we need to look at what we can do to change that.
Our new laws will speed up the removal of those with no legal right to be in our country.
Well, despite the fact that that act was passed only 11 months ago, an act which itself massively tightened the process around asylum laws, the government are now saying they need another bill, and that bill would do this.
This bill enables detention of illegal arrivals without bail or judicial review within the first 28 days of detention. They will not stop coming here until the world knows that if you enter Britain illegally, you will be detained and swiftly removed.
Take that in. Basically, the UK would be saying that anyone arriving irregularly in the UK to claim asylum wouldn't even be considered for refugee status in this country. It would therefore be an effective prohibition on claiming asylum in the UK, apart from perhaps a tiny number of circumstances at the government's discretion. And this would be very unusual. Don't just take my word for that. Take the words of the UNHCR, the UN body responsible for refugees. And they've said this: the legislation, if passed, would amount to an asylum ban, extinguishing the right to seek refugee protection in the United Kingdom for those who arrive irregularly, no matter how genuine and compelling the claim might be. This point was demonstrated vividly when the Home Secretary was asked about how a legitimate refugee was supposed to come here. A legal act, by the way, by a Conservative MP, Tim Lawton, in Parliament last year.
Just a bit of role play. I'm a 16-year-old orphan from an East African country escaping a war zone and religious persecution. And I have a sibling legally in the United Kingdom at the moment. What is a safe and legal route for me to come to the United Kingdom?
Well, we have... you're fleeing which country, sorry?
Any African country.
Any African country. Well...
Be any continent, but let's say any African country. I don't want to name one because then their Prime Minister might have a go at me for demonising their population. So let's just theoretically talk about an African country which is going through a period of turbulence and which is persecuting its citizens, including an innocent 16-year-old like me.
Well, we have an asylum system, and people can put in applications for asylum.
How would I do that?
Well, you can do it through the safe and legal routes that we have. We have offered 390,000 places to people seeking safety from various countries around the world.
Well, I'm not Syrian, I'm not Afghan, I'm not Ukrainian, not any of those specific schemes. The Dub scheme is historic. What scheme's open to me?
Well, if you are able to get to the UK, you are able to put in an application for asylum.
But I would only enter the UK illegally then, wouldn't I?
Well, that would, if you put in your application for asylum upon arrival, that would be the process that you enter.
How could I arrive in the UK if I didn't have permission to get onto an aircraft legally to arrive in the UK?
Let me just invite other colleagues if there's anything they want to add.
There is also a question about how this could possibly work in practice. The government is saying that anyone who arrives here would be deported within 28 days, save for the very young or very ill. Where would they go? Ministers have suggested Rwanda, but that agreement with Rwanda was finalised months ago and not a single person has been deported there so far. It's been mired in legal problems. Even if it worked, it's not clear that Rwanda would even have the capacity to absorb the sorts of numbers that ministers have been talking about. And this new bill, by the government's own admission, might not obey international law either, something they had to write on the front page of the bill as it was published yesterday. In addition, in the Commons yesterday, the Home Secretary said this:
there are 100 million people around the world who could qualify for protection under our current laws. Let's be clear, they are coming here.
Now, she was challenged by Susanna Reid about that specific point on the 100 million on Good Morning Britain.
You say there are 100 million people displaced around the world and likely billions more eager to come here if possible. On what planet is that likely, and how is that not inflammatory language?
Many of them are heading to the United Kingdom. We saw over 45,000 people come here on small boats alone last year. This is an unsustainable level of a problem that we've got, and it's now necessary for us to take steps to stop it.
There are 100 million displaced people worldwide. That is true. Only a quarter of them have left their own country. So even the 100 million figure doesn't hold up.
But that is the point. In that clip, the Home Secretary accepts that there are a lot of refugees and displaced people around the world. But when ministers talk about what's going on at our border, they usually talk about economic migrants. But if the Home Secretary is right in that clip, which she is, that there are so many people being displaced for political or environmental reasons, is it that surprising that a few tens of thousands of them end up at our border? And what should our obligations be to them? Because the logical corollary, the end point of what the British government is effectively arguing at the moment is that it's just somebody else's problem. There is a wider point of public scrutiny about the Home Secretary's language. She has talked about 100 million people. She's also talked about this.
The British people deserve to know which party is serious about stopping the invasion on our southern coast and which party is not.
We've seen for ourselves that this rhetoric has been employed by the far right. It is usually the Home Secretary's job to take the heat out of tensions. Her critics would argue she's done the opposite in this case. In that vein, the Home Secretary has said that we're being overwhelmed, and it is a big issue and a costly one. Millions of pounds a week in hotel costs alone. It's also true that 45,000 people is relatively small in the grand scheme of things and the refugee displacement flows that the Home Secretary herself has recognised. No one is saying that the small boats issue doesn't have to be tackled. People smuggling is an evil. But by the government's own admission, this bill may not meet our obligations under international law and would effectively prohibit claiming asylum in this country, save for some exceptional circumstances. It isn't clear that this bill is going to be the answer any more than the last one was.
The Newsagents. This is a Global Player original podcast.